just here I am to talk to you very informally about food. And as I mentioned, I lecture at Queen Margaret University. I'm also a self-titled food educator, which is not a title I like particularly. I find it a bit troublesome. If there's any other title you can come up with by the end of today, that'd be great. Just bring my way. But what it says on my business card is food educator, and I'll talk a little bit about what that means. Because I've been in the business, I suppose you could call it, or I've had the task of considering what food education is, what helpful food education is, and we need it to be now, and how we might reimagine it. And that sounds maybe like a bit of a dry topic, but hopefully I will explain. So I guess, one of the things that struck me as you invited me to come and talk to you, and I was thinking, well, it might seem a bit odd, actually, in a time where statistically there is more food available to people in the West than ever before. There's not only more food available, but there's a greater diversity of food products available at a lower price than ever, statistically. Right? Food is cheap, it's available, it must be available because we waste about a third of it every day. So there's all this food going on, all this food available, and yet we find the need to make a food community. Not only is it available and cheap and diverse, but we also fill other parts of our life with it too. It's all over our social media, it's all over the TV, tons of celebrity chefs, we have endless books, lifestyle books, recipe books. We're constantly being told how to eat, what to eat, when to eat it, who to eat it with, where to eat it, what it's going to do to our bodies afterwards, how fancy it's going to make us, how glamorous it's going to make us, all of these things we're told about food. And we have to spend time eating it. It's the other drag in our lives. And food takes up a hell of a lot of time and space. So why on earth are you here to spend more time thinking and talking about food? Equally, I'm a food educator. Surely there has never been a time in history when that job is less relevant, because frankly, we have more information available to us 24 hours a day at our fingertips that will tell us, as I say, how, when, who to eat with, what to eat, what it's going to do to your body. If you want to know anything about food, you can find it out in a second, right? So why would you need somebody to teach you anything about food? Well, in some respects, I think it's not really surprising that we spend all this time and energy and a huge part of the economy and everything thinking about food, because of course food is wonderful, right? We all like it. Historically, people have done food quite often, every day. We have to eat, it's something we not only have to do, we take great pleasure in doing it, typically. So in that sense, yeah, right. So, it's not that surprising we take this much time to think about it, but it's a little bit more than that, isn't it? Because food's also very comforting. It's also something that we go to in moments when we've had like a horrible day or something bad has happened. You reach for the, whatever it is, like biscuits, whiskey, I don't know, whatever. Or an apple, if you're healthy. That's what we do. Food is our go-to. And actually, I think that's partly why there's so much food in our lives right now. Because equally, this is a time of great abundance. More so than any other time in history in the West. But it's also the time of the greatest unrest in many ways. It's the time of the most deep-seated anxiety in a lot of ways. We have higher rates of depression than ever before. We have higher rates of all kinds of dietary-related diseases and societal problems. Why do you think that is? Any ideas? No? Well, that's all right, because not many people have the answer. But it's partly because, as some sociologists say, culture, society, and societal change is moving faster than it ever has done. Societal change happens constantly, right? But something happened in the 90s, which was the internet. And ever since then, societal change has sped up at an unprecedented rate, to the point where, the world can change day to day, in terms of politics. Crazy politicians, not mentioning any names, can make fundamental decisions that change the course of history overnight. But the difference with that now is that we all know about it. When we wake up in the morning, we see it on our phones. We all know about these changes, so we're aware of a crazy fast-paced world happening around us all the time. And so one of the things we can do to help make us feel a bit more grounded is food, right? What's the thing that is going to be more comfortable of an evening, comforting of an evening? You can either watch the news or you can watch Great British Bake Off, right? So we like the food because it's giving us a sort of grounding, but actually that's also something food does really, really well. Is it connects us with other people. We do it socially, we sit down around a table, or maybe not, we sit with other people in a room and we eat food, we have a drink together. It makes us feel community, but it also can make us feel time to replace. When you eat seasonally, potentially, it raises your awareness of what's out there. Or if you eat from a particular farm. Does anyone here eat food from farms at all? Yeah? Does anyone ever go to a farm to buy food around here? Not that many places, I guess you can we not bet? Does anyone
work at Whitmere?
You work at Whitmere? Yeah. Sweet, okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone grow food?
Yeah.
Yeah? How many people? Just show of hands. Nice. Yeah, that's great. So, anyone want to just shout out why they grow food? Why bother? Seeing as food's so cheap in the supermarket, why would you bother growing food? Tastes better.
Yeah.
Good answer. All right. Well.
Well, it's local. It doesn't travel far.
Okay, so maybe from environmental.
Yeah, where it's come from and how it's been prepared.
Right.
It lifts my spirits.
It's
on the doorstep. It doesn't come in plastic.
Yeah, right. That's nice. Yeah.
More nutrients.
Potentially. I mean, yes. I would say yes, but
An indigenous connection. That's what I think.
A what?
An indigenous connection.
Interesting. I like that answer. Why? What? Can you explain that a little bit?
I'm not Scottish. But also it's a connection to the food I grow is indigenous to this area. So it gives me a connection to the land because I'm not from here.
Yeah.
So if you grow food, it gives you more an indigenous connection to where you're living.
Right. So that's a really nice answer. And what you said as well, where it's from, how it's produced, all these things. I mean, we have to ask ourselves why that's important to us. Why do we need to know where our food comes from? Why do we need to know what it is? Well, there's quite an obvious answer. You have to eat it, right? Eating is one of the most intimate acts a human being can perform. There are pretty much only a few things that transcend the barrier between the external and the internal in a human being. And one of them is food. We need to be pretty careful. It's in our genetics to be careful about what we put in our body. Yeah? The omnivore's dilemma. Has anyone ever heard that phrase before? The omnivore's dilemma. We are omnivores, right? We can eat almost anything. If you really wanted to, you could eat that chair leg. Don't do it. Just stop saying you can if you want. But we have the dilemma of being able to eat many things, but also being aware that some of those will not have a great effect on our body. Yeah? And so we have a constant anxiety or a constant tension of knowing we can eat it, but should we? Right? And then you throw a bit of sociology into the mix. And of course, there are many things that you eat that would potentially be a value judgment on your person. Okay? A very obvious example of that is religions say they should not eat pork or fish on a certain day or whatever it is, no shellfish. Yeah? Because if you do, that is somehow against your identity. It's against the rules. There are probably many foods like that for you too. You might not know it, but there are. Okay? There might be foods you make a sort of value judgment about. I might show you some in a minute. Anyway, so one of the reasons I'm a food educator is for many of those same reasons we've been talking about. Yes, there is a lot of information out there, but it's not necessarily giving us any concrete information about our food. In fact, a lot of it is contradicting itself continually and causing a great deal of confusion. And what happens when you take that thing which is very dear to us, which is our source of comfort, potentially our source of culture, potentially also our sense of, in fact not just potentially, it is our source of identity, connection to place, connection to the people around us, connection to when and where we are. What if you take that thing and you make it massively confusing to people? Then what happens? Because one day, coffee's good for you, next day it's bad for you. And we all know about butter and margarine. I mean, that's just been a massive mess for the last 20 years, right? By the way, butter is better for you. Obviously, it tastes better. And it's all about taste. So all of this confusing stuff is going on. There's a guy called Claude Fischler, who's a French sociologist, very intelligent man. And he calls it a nutritional cacophony that is going on constantly in our lives. And that's a terrible thing to do, a thing that should be, really, it's fundamental to human life. It's also fundamental to human happiness. And then to make it so confusing, it's a really awful thing to do to people. But it's not just the nutritional messages that are confusing, is it? What other stuff do you hear about food these days?
Miles.
Yep. How it's produced.
Genetic
Yeah.
modified, contaminated.
So, and some of these are food miles, impact it's having on the planet.
Moral messages.
Moral messages.
Eating animals.
Okay, yeah, right, good. So, like, what's ethical, what's not?
The real cost of some food in terms of water, energy.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Food poverty.
Food poverty, yeah. Guilt. We feel a lot of guilt because there are some people who have none, while a lot of us have more, and then there are some folk who have way too much. So there seems to be a sort of imbalance in distribution of food. All of these different messages are going on all the time, and this is really difficult. And what it points to is that food is complex. Is it any more complex now than it ever has been? Not really. But we have more information at our fingertips constantly, and that's what makes it more confusing. So part of my job is to help people navigate that information and to help them find a sort of slightly less anxiety-ridden path through the act of eating. Alright, there's another reason I like teaching about food, and I'm gonna present you with a few different props. Just moving out of range of your camera, sorry.
I should have moved it here. I don't know why.
That's alright.
It doesn't matter.
So what is food? Anyone has a guess? Tell me what you think. What is food?
Something that you put inside your body to give you energy.
Right. Does that include drugs? Because ecstasy does a very similar thing.
I wouldn't know.
Neither do I. Just
I guess not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a good question for you actually. Are those things food out there?
No.
Rabbits, by the way, I'm pointing at rabbits.
Yes.
They are lovely.
Right. So there you go. For some, yes. For others, no.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So it is food, but it isn't. Interesting. Okay. What else is food objectively? So it's a thing that gives you energy, right? Okay. What else?
Well, nutrition keeps you alive.
Okay. Vitamin pills. Are they food?
No, I wouldn't say no.
Okay. Interesting.
It fills you up.
Fills you up. All right. Straw fills you up. So that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. What else?
It tastes good and you get pleasure from it.
That did it.
Okay. Fine. This is tasty. Is it food?
No.
It's food. It's food.
Not for my 5-year-old.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of somewhere between I don't know, an art project and crack. I mean, these are delicious.
Crack for 5-year-olds.
Definitely, right? Definitely. Okay, but so who is this for? Kids. All right. How do you eat them?
A bag at a time.
Right. Good. Bag at a time. So presumably you open this thing. Yeah. You pull out them one at a time, and do you cook them? Do you boil them?
Straight in the mouth.
Straight in the mouth. Okay. Good. When do you eat these?
Lunchtime.
Right. Okay. Cool. So they're not
7
breakfast
o'clock in the morning.
Maybe after raving. I don't know. Okay. Okay. Right. So, who would these have been for 100 years ago?
Very, very wealthy.
Okay. 500 years ago.
Didn't exist.
Didn't exist. Would these have been considered food 500 years ago?
No.
No. Probably not. Okay. How's about that?
I don't know.
Lots of plastic.
It's marketing.
Okay.
Marketing healthy food.
Thank you, Nestle.
Thank you, Nestle.
Yeah.
Are these Nestle?
Yeah, they're Nestle.
I don't think they are actually.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised. But, right. Okay. Cool. Are they food?
It's more of a medication again, isn't it?
I mean, this is very nutritionally complete, apparently.
Right.
So it's nutritious, but is it food?
But when do you eat them?
There's
I don't really have them.
yeah.
How do you have them? I don't even know what you do with them.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good question. How do you eat these? Does anyone know?
I thought it was like a medication.
Zero fat.
Is it those? Is it yogurty things? Is it those
It's
yogurty
dairy with
things?
zero fat.
Right. They're meant to have healthy
Bacteria.
Backfit,
Yeah.
I mean, they
yeah.
don't.
So they're good for your gut, apparently. These things, right?
They say it.
Yeah. Hello.
I was told
Yes.
that the amount that you would need to eat for it to be good for your gut
Yeah.
is astronomical.
Yeah.
Quite possible. Quite possible. So right. So what do we think about like the sort of time scale of these things? Like, what would anyone 50 years ago have recognised these things?
No.
Possibly.
Possibly as a yogurt.
Possibly, yeah, because it's quite similar to things like, well, it's not actually, but conceptually, kefir, yogurt, you know, these things that are very, very old products. But 100 years ago, I mean, it's, you know, it's in a form which is a bit alien to somebody, yeah. How about this? Oh, I should have asked. Who's that for, by the way?
Gullible people.
It's interesting.
Okay.
Wealthy.
It's
Wealthy
interesting.
folk. Okay.
It's marketed in the bottle shape is of a medicine bottle.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
actually like
specifically it's marketed for those who think they need medicine.
Yeah, creamy people that think they need it for their health.
Yeah, people that I use wishing
And
that.
what eat well.
Huh?
What eat well.
There's a lot
The
of
word
those.
well, yeah.
There's a lot of those out there.
An elderly relative of mine was recently advised by her doctor to buy those.
Yeah, it's very common.
Is he on commission or something?
Probably. Yeah.
It's the easiest go-to way for a doctor to recommend that somebody gets more probiotics in their diet, sadly. Or they could just put some veg and some salty water and let it ferment, but that's another story. Okay, so what's this? Can you tell me?
I don't know.
Okay, alright.
Good.
Some sort of grain. Alright, do you want to pass it around? See if anyone else knows. Yeah, that is.
Quinoa. No.
It's quinoa.
Quinoa.
Quinoa. You pronounce it quinoa?
Quinoa, yeah. Okay, so is this food?
Yeah.
Yes.
Small quinoa.
Everybody says yes. What do you do? What do you do with it?
Boil it.
Boil it.
Boil it. Okay, and then
Then eat it.
Eat it.
Like rice.
it's like rice. Okay, cool.
Rice. Couscous.
Cool. Who's it for?
Anyone.
Posh milk.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. When do you eat it? Breakfast? Lunch? Dinner?
Dinner.
Snack?
Tends to substitute, start substitute the main meal.
Okay, cool. Here in Scotland, 50 years ago, is it food?
No.
No. Where was it food 50 years ago?
South America.
Yeah.
Central America. So.
Yeah, they use barley.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
disappeared.
exactly. Yeah. I did actually want to bring some barley along and I didn't. Do you know why?
Giant quinoa is slightly different.
Giant quinoa.
Yeah. It's like eating fish eyes.
Ooh, that's very good.
It's about 5 times the size of them.
So, the reason I brought a few examples like that along, and you know, carry on doing that for ages. I do that a lot with people. Is to point out that the definition of food is fluid, right? It depends on when you are, where you are, who you are, your cultural references, your biological references, so the environment around you, all of those things. So we think of food as a fact. It isn't. Food is a social construction. Yeah, that is a fact. And that's hard for a lot of people to stomach. Excuse the stomach-oriented pun. It happens a lot. But, food, the definition of it, what is edible and what is savoured, those are different things, because almost everything is edible, but only certain things are savoured and prized at any given time, changes from decade to decade, from community to community. But nowadays it changes really bloody fast. Yeah. So, butter being an example. Yeah. One day we know it's fine and it's good and it's a fact of life, and the next day it's like, ooh, I don't know about that. Ooh, I've been told that's not very good for you, and suddenly you have a distrust in you. Yeah. So this is called polysemia. Food is polysemic, which means that it has multiple meanings to different people at different times. We construct those meanings. The food does not do it itself. A carrot, that's a bad example. Okay. A loaf of white bread has remained a loaf of white bread for a few hundred years, but its meaning and who eats it has changed significantly from place to place and time to time. Yeah? I mean, think about the loaf of white bread in the UK in the last 50 years. Yeah, it's gone from being the standard to now being, well, you don't really eat that unless, you're broke or whatever.
Nobody's looking.
Yeah. Good answer. Yeah, but it's really become a class issue. Bread in particular it really is a class issue in the UK, which is very interesting.
It was from the Second World War, wasn't it, really? Because...
Well, see, it all goes back to Victorians. I love Victorians. They're a fascinating era of British history. And it was that time when, the ability to be socially aspirational, so to move class became a lot more fluid in the Victorian era, and so people were able to become a class above themselves by conspicuous consumption. So what they wear, what they ate, all the rest. There was more cash available to people at that time. And so buying a loaf of white bread could indicate that you were rising through the social classes. And that's why at that time people in the upper social classes started eating brown bread. Right? Well, later on, but still. So, anyway, so that's to say, food is polysemic. It means different things at different times. That's why I'm a food educator. Food, see, I don't actually teach about food. What I do teach people about is the fact that food can give you an insight into almost any aspect of human life or environmental world, right? Because every time you eat, you're eating a product of culture, belief, history, the environment, the economy, politics. I could go on. All of these things are active in every bite of food that you eat, including your own belief about what it is that you're putting in your body. Where do you get that from? I mean, I just asked you a load of questions about who are these foods for, how do you eat them, how do you know that stuff? Did someone take you aside at school and tell you all that? Pretty sure they didn't. It's usually on the packet, right? Yeah, but you know to read the packet. This is not obvious. It's obvious to us because we've been trained to think this way. We've been trained to think that food comes in packets, right? It's not as normal as we think it is, and this is the other reason that food is a brilliant education tool, because it is unseen. We don't think about it. It's a fact. It's something you do every day. You do it 3 times a day. It's just there. You get on with it. It just happens. It comes from somewhere. It appears in your shopping basket, especially if you've got children who sneak things in there, and then you take it home and it's gone the next day and you've forgotten about it, right? So there's so much that we can learn from looking at people's eating habits, sociologically speaking, that gives us amazing insight into their beliefs about who they are, where they are. Yeah. So that's what I do. So Yeah, so I've been teaching, or I wrote and have been teaching this gastronomy program for the last 6 years. And whenever I say that to people, they're like, "Oh wow, cool! So like the stars." I'm like, "Yeah, gastronomy." Oh right, so like chefing. No, we don't do any cooking in the program at all. The students do a lot of cooking by themselves, and they bring their food in to share with one another, and they love talking about cooking and about recipes and whatever, but it's not something we study. Like, that is the more boring part of food studies, to my mind. The most interesting part is, as I say, all of the belief and history that comes behind it. And the thing that I'm most interested in is how it tells us about our relationship to land, which particularly in Scotland, you mentioned indigenous food, particularly in Scotland is a big issue now with access to land. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know about all of that. Having an allotment, having a place to grow food, not that common. Not that common. Not just because there isn't land available to people, but also because if they have land, they don't know what to do with it. How is that possible in an agricultural nation? How did that happen? And the history behind that is one of the things I'm most fascinated about, and I help people understand that history and the reasons why Scotland has such a poor diet. Apparently, we eat very bad. We don't have any food culture. That's nonsense, by the way. But the point is that yes, Scotland does have a serious and not particularly helpful relationship with its food right now. So I help people understand that, like the government. They don't like the answers very much, but they do ask. They will keep asking. So that's what we teach in gastronomy. That, along with how food communications affect us. So, why does packaging look this way? Why are these in small bottles? You mentioned the medicine thing. Yeah, exactly. So, what all of this kind of food communications does to us, how it trains us, how social media impacts our relationship with food. We also look very much at the food system and the science that informs food production and food consumption. So that's what I do for my day job. And then I've kind of whittled down my hours with them recently, and now I've launched my own company called Food Connects, which does that kind of food education outside the classroom. So for companies, for individuals, for organisations, and hopefully also for high schools. That's one thing I'm looking at doing down here in the Borders, although it's fantastically difficult to get into a high school. But why? Why does anyone need to learn all this stuff? Well, from my perspective, are you going to say something?
Yeah, well, perfect example would be, I was born in Birmingham,
Right.
and it wasn't until the age of 7 when we moved to the country that I discovered that milk didn't come in bottles.
Right.
It actually came from a cow.
Right.
So
Yeah. But why does that matter?
because I suppose ignorance.
But there's also I don't know how an iPhone is made.
How
An iPhone is made. I have no clue, but I use it all the time. So why would it matter that children know where milk comes from?
You don't eat an iPhone.
Huh?
You don't eat an iPhone.
I don't, but I do use it.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect your health generally.
Yeah.
Because we've lost the need to be connected.
Generally.
I think that the difference with food is that, as I started out by saying, it's fundamental, but it's also where we get our comfort from. It's also where we get our nutrition from on a very basic level, but also our nourishment and that. So our gastronomy program at Queen Margaret University, the program is based around the philosophy of a man called Briat-Savarin, who was a French philosopher and lawyer, who said that gastronomy is not about hedonistic eating, it is not about fine food products, but it is about the reasoned study of everything that nourishes mankind. Now, what nourishes is not the same as nutrition. Nourishment is about psychological, emotional, cultural nourishment. Yeah, how we feel in a place, how we feel connected to a place. Do we feel useful? Do we feel like we're doing something meaningful? Do we feel like we are being paid attention to, that we can give back. All of these are important, fundamental human things that we have a right to access and a right to build for ourselves. And as I was saying in the beginning, we live in very difficult times where that is becoming increasingly difficult for individuals. We live in a very individualistic society where everybody has their own house and their own fridge and their own TV and their own this and their own that, their own car. And that's great, it's amazing, that's progress, right? But it does mean that we don't connect with each other in the same way that we have done in previous centuries. I am not one of those people who advocates for going back to the land and turning the time back. I think that's ridiculous. We can't do that. We must go forward. But surely we are technologically advanced enough and intelligent enough to figure out a way to move forward socially. And food is a key part of that, because it's the thing, as I say, that helps us connect with one another and helps us connect with where we are and when we are. So that's the key element of my food.
So when you talk about food being something that nourishes you, and that has to be, you're implying a sort of element of emotional response or trust in the food that you're eating. That's completely vanished in the last 50 years. And now people are afraid of what they eat.
Right.
And worried about what they're eating in a way that, my father used to say, we just used to worry about whether we would eat, not what we would eat. But now in this generation, people like the cow, the worry about the cow is that it has huge potential to damage the environment. The process has huge potential to vanish mankind, to influence our health. So there is
change partly in response to the fact that we have removed ourselves from it. So we have removed ourselves from food production on land and handed that responsibility over to a very few. And I'm the last person to vilify farmers or to say they're doing the wrong thing. They're not. They're doing what they have been, in a sense, told to do, and or that the market has given them the opportunity to do. But the thing is that we can all say, well, it's the farmers. No, it's everyone's responsibility to take part in their food production. Everyone's. But how can you do that if you don't necessarily know how it works? It's one of the wonderful great things about growing your own is you suddenly get a real tangible understanding of what it is to grow food, to produce food. Yeah. I mean, not on a farm scale, but you have some idea, you have a better idea. So in our program, we take our students, obviously we do stuff in class, we teach them the theories, sociological theories behind things, we teach them scientific theories, we teach them, most up-to-date research about various elements of food, culture, science, systems, and communications. But we also bring a lot of people from the food system and food journalism, food education, the government, in to meet them and to talk to them about what's going on. We also take them out to a lot of different farms. We take them to Tesco, this distribution centre. We take them into factories. We take them, into a really broad range of food businesses and food places to show them the reality. We do not push one agenda. We talk about everything from the smallest organic farms to right through to the biggest factories. That's important because that is the reality. That is the reality of what's going on. And for our alumni going back out into the food world, they need to understand what's actually going on. Yeah. And a lot of them come in with real bias towards a certain type of food production and come out having let go of that. We hope. It's not that they can't have an opinion, but the whole point of gastronomy, I was speaking to somebody earlier about, you're a food expert. And I said, well, I'm really not, actually. I'm a generalist, which is basically, in the academic world, I am the scum of the earth. Generalists are really, really shunned. They're looked down upon. So people who know a little bit of a lot of different things, what good are they? Well, actually, it turns out they're quite useful. Because a lot of different aspects of a lot of different aspects of the food world don't talk to each other, but they are completely interrelated. And yet, I had a fantastic moment a couple of years ago. I was at the Border Union show. Has anyone been to that? Yeah, it's a good show. I like it. But there was a SYEC stands, so the Scottish Rural College. And I went in and said, "Oh, hey, I'm from Queen Mother University. I teach this program of gastronomy, and we'd love to come and like do some work with you guys." And this guy's looking at me like I'm completely mad. He's like, "But we don't do anything with food." I was like, "Wow, you're an agricultural. Okay, all right, that's cool." So from their perspective, agriculture and food are completely unrelated, and this worries me, understandably. And also, you know, nutritionists and farmers do not talk. That's crazy. That is crazy for many reasons that I don't have time to go into today. But you know, and I mean the list goes on. Politicians don't meet farmers. Well, yeah. We had a symposium a couple of years ago. Symposiums are typically these incredibly boring academic get-togethers where people come and puff each other up and present their papers and then go home having learned nothing. Very rude. And so I decided to have a slightly different one where there was gin and beer and good food and good times. And we did it over 2 days. And we got together people from absolutely the most diverse areas of the food world, including artists, poets, musicians, politicians, farmers, activists, journalists, supermarket reps, gin producers. I mean, you name it, everyone was there. And we got them all together in a room. And yeah, we did some, you know, we presented some papers, presented some ideas, showed some movies, whatever, and then we got together and had a talk. And it was like electricity. It was amazing, the amount of ideas that popped out of this thing. It's great. But it was just 2 days in a year. That needs to happen all the time.
Excuse me.
No props.
Cheers, Anna. Thanks, Mark. See you later.
And that's kind of what we aim to do with the kind of food education we're talking about. I think food education at that level that connects ideas, that shows us that food isn't just something, it's not just about nutrition, it's not just about reproduction, this is about life, this is about people, this is about culture, it's about politics, it's about all of these things all the time. And yes, it's complex, and yes, it's difficult, but you know what? It is the most important topic on the planet, because we all do it every day and it affects everything.
And what got everybody talking before was just the gin and the beer.
What?
Yeah, all that wonderful conversation, all those ideas. Like the only difference I've heard is that the fact that with gin and beer, they're like, was like the main thing, that people just relaxed and they sort of all these ideas.
No, they met each other. They met each other. That was the biggest difference.
Was it that you had such a diverse, like a really
We brought together people that
never would have come to a normal that met?
You know, they never would have talked to each other, partly because they didn't think it was relevant.
Yeah.
You know. And yes, actually, I'm afraid the gin and the beer does make a difference. Because
it works for my Spanish classes as well.
Yeah, well, yeah. No, but actually, do you know, I mean, I get invited to a lot of very important food events. You know, usually run by the government or run by people like just, you know, Nourish Scotland.
Yes,
you know. Some great organisations, the Soil Association across Scotland, who get together to talk about food policy. And you know what? 100% of the time, the food is terrible. What the hell is going on? No, for reals. Pete Ritchie and I have stood at a couple of government organisations in front of the sandwich table going, "This is a joke. This is actually a joke." We were invited to a conference some years back, actually, about how to change Scotland's food culture. Scotland's food culture is a problem, we've got to change it. It's like, you can't just change a food culture, it doesn't work like that. But anyway, at this thing, you know, talking about, we need more vegetables, blah, blah, blah. Absolutely predictably, the sandwich table at lunch, processed meat, white bread. What? I mean, what? No. What are you thinking? They're going on and on about Scotland, the land of food and drink. We produce so many wonderful things. Look at our glens and our hills. So,
the cheapest, closest cafe gets the supply of food.
Yeah, right. Yeah, often.
Oh.
Which is, you know, and I understand why that is the case. I understand why that happens. You know, everyone's on tight budgets. It is difficult, but this is a product of exactly what I'm talking about, which is disconnect. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. When food is usually and often, the last thing people think about. Even if they're talking about food policy, they're not really thinking about it, and that's what gastronomy is for, right? That's its purpose. Our alumni go back out into the world, and they are able to go back into their jobs, which are very diverse. So we have students coming from journalism, from education, from all over the place. and they go back into their jobs or they create new ones, and they try to reinvent how people are engaging with food issues, you know. And yes, often it involves gin and beer.
Is it that people are just so busy that they haven't got time to like think about food?
No.
Is it that it's just kind of like flat out all day? You come back and it's just right. I need
There's
to
that. Okay, so the busyness thing, right? We are busy, but statistically, the average Brit watches about 2 hours of television a day. Well, it was 3 hours a couple of years ago. I don't know why it's gone down, but anyway, maybe screen time though. Who knows, right? Who knows how much time we spend on our phones, etc., etc. Are we that busy, or are we just prioritising our time in a particular way? Yeah. And this is not a blame thing. I'm not saying people aren't spending more time on food. No, it's their choice. Like, people have that choice. But you know, there are lots of reasons that we don't engage with food. One of the reasons we don't engage with food is because we are being told so many different things all the time. It becomes a bit overwhelming. Weirdly, what do we do in those moments? We turn to food for comfort. And literally, the rise in the amount of time spent watching food-related programs, I mean, it's astronomical. We spend huge amounts of time watching celebrity chefs and food-related programs. And at the same time, although I don't know how they judge this, but they think statistically the amount of time people spend cooking is just going down and down and down and down. The average person spends about 20 minutes a day preparing food. 20 minutes is not a long time, you know?
That does not relate to their connection to food, although they're seeing it on a flat screen. It's still, for them, consciously connecting to food.
And so consuming food is no longer, well, it's not so much about what you're actually putting in your mouth, but consuming the ideas of food has become a much bigger part of our life, and we do it on social media. If anyone's on Instagram, you'll know that. So after selfies, so selfies are the most common thing on Instagram. The second most common thing is food. Yeah, and that's because it's gratifying, it's satisfying, it is, you know, comforting, it's compelling. It also tells other people a lot about who you are based on what kind of food you post on your Instagram.
Doesn't that relate back to, we talked about earlier about technology and how we're becoming more individualized?
Yeah.
Versus a generation or two ago, or some of us are a little bit longer in the tooth, had developed through, our learning developed through, say, Ernest Noss, this Norwegian philosopher, had called it the unconscionable act, is that either we absorb it through generations or the people around us or our parents or grandparents, multi-generational, wasn't through screens or televisions. We absorbed that acceptance of what food is, and then we knew we could make choices that we didn't really have to think about. We just knew it was good because our parents said it was good or grew up in front of us or something else. Versus now, that disconnection doesn't happen.
Exactly. So how we get our information about food is obviously radically different, right? But not just how you get information about food. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's how you learn the practices of food. So how you learn how to do food, and that means the growing, the processing, the selection in the first place. You know, like how do you know what to grow? You know, one of my students is actually just currently doing her dissertation on where people get their knowledge of food growing in community gardens. Yeah. And the title of her dissertation is Google Our New Granny. Because, which is very clever. Because of course, you know, you can't just, for a lot of people, you can't just go to their granny and say, what did you grow? Especially not in Scotland, because the granny probably didn't grow. That's the interesting thing. You know, Scotland has had a disconnect from land and food growing for quite a long time now. And where are we getting our knowledge from? If we're getting it from Google, or from YouTube or whatever, that's totally fine, that's great, it's awesome that people are, you know, teaching themselves how to do food in multiple ways, but it also isn't place-based. It's not specific to where you are. I mean, does that matter? Who knows? She will find out in her dissertation. Anyway, so all these questions and more, this is what my kind of food education is about. It's about getting people to engage with this, and I think that's really important. I think it's important because I'm pretty sure we're going to carry on eating for a while as a planet. Although there are people trying to stop that. There are quite a large number of products. Has anyone tried Huel?
Sorry?
Huel. There's another one too.
Corn. No, sorry.
No. Well, yeah. But what's that fantastic sci-fi movie made in the 80s or maybe even the late 70s about Soylent Green? Has anyone seen that? Soylent Green. It's people. You won't get that. It's a processed product that is a complete food, right? And so food is banned on planet Earth in this movie, and instead of food, people are just given this thing, and it's supposed to simplify life and make you more productive because you spend less time on food, right? But it makes people miserable, obviously, because it takes out all the joy of life. Anyway, so they're all eating this thing called Soylent Green, and then at some point in the movie, spoiler alert, sorry, but at some point in the movie, the guy goes to the factory and finds that all his friends' dead bodies are being put into the machine, and actually, oh my god, we're eating people. Anyway, some genius decided that what we really need in our modern lives is to cut out the messiness of food, and so they have invented a product called Soylent. Hey!
This is real?
Yes, absolutely.
Serious.
And so there's a few. Soylent is one. It was, I think, the first sort of one to be rolled out on the market. And then there's one called Huel as well, which is onomatopoeic.
That's California.
It's really disgusting. So we do every year with my students. We do a session called What is Food, and we look at some of the most innovative scientific developments in how to get around the messy business of food. And we look at all kinds of things like Yakult and whatever, just to try and figure out what they are. And we do this tasting, as you were doing a wine tasting, with little glasses of meal replacement shakes with Huel and Soylent and all the rest of it. And some of them are more palatable than others, but they really are genuinely quite disgusting. And there are people trying to live off these things, particularly in Silicon Valley. There's a few people who've documented by blogging about their lives of not eating food. And do you know what the upshot is? Anyone has a guess?
They get sick.
Yeah. Yeah, they get sick.
It's the same group of guys doing the same thing with fish. They're taking the genetic DNA of a number of species in California, and they're replicating the flesh by DNA replication. So you'd have a chunk of tuna actually never been in the water.
So
wow.
like
the lab-grown meat and this sort of thing. Yeah, lab-grown meat is the next big moneymaker. That's if somebody can figure out how to do that cheaply, they are going to be a very rich man.
Right next to corn.
Right. Anyway, all of these things are fascinating. So I'm less fascinated about what is good for us today and what's bad for us today. That's actually the least interesting part of food for me. I think what's more interesting is where do those beliefs come from? Why are those messages being put out there? Whose interest is it for us to believe that coffee is bad today or good or whatever it is?
The massive corporation.
Oh yes, the money makers, the big ones.
And unraveling one thing. Pete. When I first met Pete Ritchie, by the way, who runs Nourish Scotland and also is the farmer at Lumia Farm. Very, very amazing man. And the first time he came to speak to our students, he came out with a catchphrase, which I know is widely known, but he said, if you want to understand any part of the food system, follow the money. Mm-hmm. And ever since then it's been like, gastronomy, follow the money. It's a catchphrase, you can tell that.
Is that the same with any system though?
Yes, it is, but it's not something people think about when it comes to food.
Yeah. But
interestingly.
Aren't we all quite sceptical now? We think that everything is about money, literally everything, apart from this. Yeah, which is a good point. I am. I kind of think, right, all right, where's the money in this? And there usually is an angle somewhere.
Yeah.
Whether it's clothes, whether it's food, whether it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Everything seems to be about that.
Yeah, it's very, very true. But, one of the things that... So in my job... and for my master's degree that I studied as well, I've had to study the food system a lot, and quite frankly, it's massively depressing. It is hugely depressing. It is a lot about corporate greed, and it is a lot to do with corruption and environmental degradation and all those things that humanity has dreamt up for itself. It really is awful. But I don't think, specifically for what I do, which is helping people understand the complexity of food and then use that. Right, constructively. I don't find that very helpful. It is important to understand the food system, yes, but it's not helpful to get bogged down in the depressingness of it. And the reason I say that particularly is because, as I started this talk with, food is our comfort. It is where we get ourselves from. Literally, you are what you eat. Your body is the thing you ate yesterday, right? But also because it's your identity, it's who you are, it's how you relate to the world and each other. So getting depressed about it, not helpful. Not helpful. You've got to retain your positive relationship with it. And unfortunately, I apologise if this offends anyone. I've probably said loads of offensive things today, actually, but if this offends anyone, it's one of the worst things out there, in my opinion, in the media right now, is the clean eating movement. It is the clean eating movement. So there are various health food gurus who've made a lot of money, follow the money, out of talking about what is about it's called
like
the clean
the
diet.
money side of it, whereas the clean movement idea, I like that. But yeah, if it's a big movement of fancy chefs and fancy cookbooks, that maybe it's not so nice.
The difference is there is absolutely no problem of obviously in encouraging people to eat more vegetables. Right, but if
What's
that's what
clean about it? Sorry.
right, but if that's what it was about, if it was literally let's eat more veg, it's great. Here's some great recipes, fantastic. Who could argue with that?
Yeah.
But the problem here is the word clean. Wait a minute. So the rest of the food is dirty? That causes anxiety, as if we needed more in our lives about it's not only anxiety about the food that's in front of us and oh my god, should I choose that? Do I have organic chickpeas or non-organic chickpeas? Or like what do? Oh my god, what's clean? Thank God, deliciously.
I bet I'm not going to taste.
Quite right. Yeah. I mean, thank God deliciously Ella is here to tell us what to do with our lives and how to eat, because it's really difficult without her. I say that with sarcasm.
Isn't it more about what they're creating as a marketing angle?
Yes,
versus
but that's
it's not a movement, nor is it.
But it's very clever in that,
It's because it's playing on insecurities.
It's playing on everyone's insecurities. This is not new. We've been doing this for a long time. Every diet ever invented, ever, and put in Cosmopolitan is exactly for that, right? It's to make you feel bad about yourself so that you will buy certain products, right? Of course, this is not new. But the reason I have a problem with this particular movement is because it's actually, it's supposedly a very positive movement to encourage people to engage with food positively, but through a kind of insidious damning of certain things that you might find comfort in. Damn it, that's not fair. And I think what it's doing is it's basically bringing a great divisiveness to food, which we don't need right now. What we do need is to cultivate a more meaningful relationship with it. And that means understanding what it actually is in the first place. Don't just rely on somebody else to tell you what products to buy. Go and find out about it. What are they? Where do they come from? How are they made? It's interesting. If anything else, it's fascinating. Alright, this, we all might go, oh, I wouldn't eat that, but I would, they're great, they're really tasty. But I'm not gonna eat these every day, because I know what they do to me, or would do to me if I did, right? I happen to love wine. And according to the clean eating movement, that is very bad. But I went to study gastronomy, what I now teach, in Italy, where the majority of the people, it was very hard. And the majority of the people there have a fantastic relationship with food and wine. And they eat what the clean eating movement would consider is very dirty food. They eat cheese, bad, and lots of pasta. And yes, they drink wine.
Clean movement. I was sitting down with a friend who I hadn't seen in a while, and he had joined the movement. And I sat down, and we're having, this is in Canada, and anyway, we were having a meal, and I ordered coffee, and I said, you want a coffee? And he said, no, I don't drink my calories.
Interesting.
that was part of his clean food movement. He goes, no, the fluids don't give me my calories. I don't eat vegetables.
Where is the clean movement?
It's just
sort
crazy.
Where does it put itself out? I've not heard of it. I mean, I don't watch television actually, so I
It's
don't
actually
know.
mainly on social media. So, majority of the clean eating trend. Does anyone use Instagram here? No, look at you. You probably do, right? Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay. So if you go on Instagram or just go on the internet actually and just type into Google or into your Instagram search #clean eating, right? You'll see. I don't want to vilify it entirely. Well, I do, but I don't. I'm just saying, like it's like I said to Adam, it's not the foods they're talking about. That's fine. Yes, eat more vegetables. Yes.
Isn't the clean side of it though the fact that they prefer to be organic? They're talking about the clean in terms of not pesticides.
No, they're talking about gluten-free mainly.
Right. So is it diet stuff? Is it?
It's diet stuff.
Okay.
It's diet stuff, and it's in
into it.
conjunction with certain lifestyle
I think it was more sort of clean in terms of pesticides and chemicals.
There are definitely people talking about that, but it's not. That's often not the focus,
Right.
because actually that is a very. Now, this is the interesting thing about the clean eating movement is they rarely get political because they can't, because they've got to sell books.
Yeah.
So it's rarely about that. And I think I saw a great interview with Deliciously Ella a little while ago, who seems like a very nice woman, but she was pressed on matters like that, and she basically has this attitude, well, I can't really talk about that. It's like, yeah, of course you can't talk about that, because your PR person is standing behind you going, don't talk about that. But it's not, she probably does have a very strong opinion on it, and I would imagine she'd probably say what most people in this room would say, right? But that's not the point. It's not about what she believes, it's about how that social media is impacting 14-year-olds, or us, I mean, whenever I look at, for example, like Women's Health magazine, I try not to because I find it quite difficult to read. And I don't mean that in the sense of the words are wrong. I mean that in the sense of it makes me feel really bad. After I've read a Women's Health magazine, I'm looking at my body going, oh God. Or like, oh, I really should do more exercise. Or, and I'm like, where is that coming from? I'm fine. We all know this stuff. There's lots of those messages out there, and I don't think that, it's helpful. It's helpful to make people feel like that about food. What's more helpful, as I say, is to give people the space and time to really connect with their food. And I think, often people say to me, oh, well, it has to start in schools. Yes, it should start in schools. It should start in primary school. It should happen in high school. But you know what? It should also happen in college and university, and after that too. And food education should be something that we all do all the time, that we have access to. Because we all have to eat, we all have to do it. So that's my spiel. Does anyone have any questions? Hi. Any questions? Or anyone disagree? I don't want to have a heckle. I love that.
The only thing that I think, or I thought was, isn't it like a lot of the crux of it is kind of like at this moment it's quite a difficult time because there is so much information, like you've said many times, and it does kind of spin your head out, but it's new, obviously, with the internet. So we've got all this new information. So it's kind of understandable that we're in this predicament of being confused about food and about many things, about politics, about, I don't know. So isn't it just that's the case, and it's kind of, we have to deal with that for a little while, we have to sort of crack on, and it's kind of a little bit down to the individual as well, not to get sucked in a lot of the times to the matrix, and kind of stay away from that and just sort of follow your instincts and maybe just graze or whatever you need to do.
But that's hard.
It's hard, but I see that's the only kind of way to go forward, because otherwise if you're in there with all these things, it is really difficult, and you will be under a lot of pressure. The same with magazines or all these types of things.
We're all under a lot of pressure all the time, and I think one of the things that we do in the university, and what I try to do with companies and people I work with in my own business, is to cultivate criticality in them. The difficulty about a lot of the information that we're being given now, it's not that the underlying message is actually any different to any other advertising from any other era, but it's just that there's so much of it, and it's all telling you to stop thinking. Don't think. I've got the answer. Look, just relax. You've got no time. I know. I realise you're very, very busy people. We've sorted it all out for you, right? And that is super seductive. That is massively seductive. Because you know what? Like, I get food fatigue. I get tired of thinking about all this stuff. And, you know, having to hold on to it all and investigate the food system and knowing, you know, everything from agriculture to aesthetics. Like, it's hard. And it would be lovely, it would be wonderful to just switch off and let somebody else make decisions for me. But I know that doesn't work for me. And, you know, helping our students, or anyone I work with, foster those skills is part of the education. Like I said, I don't really teach people about food. It's just that food is a way to help people learn.
You just said about Connect, so your company's called Food Connects, and you're connecting, as we should all be, with food. I mean, I'm a forest school leader, so we help people to connect with nature, with roots. My dad had an allotment, I grew up with it, I was growing stuff, whether it was flowers or radishes or whatever, so it's something that I've also passed on to my kids, but it's something that we're all lacking now, because it is, with the internet and, as you say, being bombarded with different diets, different ways of eating, what you should eat, what you should. I mean, a little bit of what you fancy, and that includes a bit of muck, you know, it's good for you.
I think it really is. Yeah, absolutely. And it's lovely to hear that you're working in forest school. It's great. I think, you know, gosh, I think it should be mandatory for kids to get outside and get muddy. And I mean, come on.
Like you trying to get in to talk about connecting to food, then equally for them to connect to nature. I mean, it's been lost.
I don't think it's been lost. I think it's less common. I think it is still happening. You're lots of you grow food, right? It is happening. It is out there, and I meet people all the time who are doing fantastic work, connecting kids with agriculture, getting them outdoors, getting them growing food, all the rest of it. Although I was on a farm the other day, up near Edinburgh, Barfed. And the lady who owns the farm, she said, "Oh, it's brilliant. We've got these primary school kids out here the other day, and they came out in a big bus. And before they get off the bus, they were lectured on: do not touch the animals, do not touch any fence posts, do not shake hands with the farmer. If you do touch any of these things, if you touch your boots when you have been walking on the ground, you must come back to the bus and disinfect your hands. That is the rule." And they would, they couldn't engage with anything when they were out on the farm. And at the end of it, the farmer said to one of the teachers, she's like, "This is quite difficult. It's quite difficult to have this visit with these rules." And the lady said, "Yeah, I know. Maybe next time we should do it by Skype." And she was like, "All right, okay." We do, and I actually know quite a lot of parents is equal to doing the actual thing.
I get a little bit about the agriculture. My son's had an intestinal transplant, and to be we're in agricultural rural communities, and there is microorganisms within the soil and animal feces and whatnot that can be harmful. So he's immunosuppressed. So I did take a hand gel with me for afterwards, but he's in amongst the animals and the muck,
Yeah.
I took a group of 42 berry picking in late July. I work in deprived community.
Oh, near you. Oh, Manchester.
Yeah, that was just a bunch of Finster. Anyway, we'll get that. I took a group from this community to berry picking and did a question. Just told them, just do what you want. Most important thing you do here is never leave your children's side. And it wasn't for safety; it's about engagement. So,
that's so nice.
Yeah, it's not about safety. It's about if you need to engage with what you're doing with your children. So that way they have that positive connection for it. And there's no health and safety.
Right.
And you're in there's no animals, there's no tractors. It's a field of bears. Go and do what you want to do. Get dirty, do whatever. Out of the 42, 18 adults had never picked a berry in their life. So it was the first time they engaged, and it is those levels of engagement.